welcome back to another episode of With Sonar. This is the last Wednesday of October. Tony, good to have you back again with us. Nothing's happened in the world of freight since you were gone last week.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing's happened at all.
I was going to say, missed out on a whole lot.
But of course...
Slow news week.
Slow news week, yeah. There's a small little shop that went under, but otherwise nothing happened. But no, I mean, in all reality, right? We all know Convoy. I feel like it's funny about Convoy. They went under now. I think they're still trying to sell their tech.
I think they found a buyer for their tech.
They found a buyer already? Okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. It's like it was such a big story last week, and I feel like it's just evaporated already. Like everybody seems like they've already moved on.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it, I mean, kind of has to move on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yellow, I feel like dragged on a little bit longer. Now, it's not really a fair fight.
Yeah, because, I mean, I think when you look at Yellow, it had I don't want to say a death sentence. I mean, it might be the best way to phrase it. But, I mean, it was like just this slow, long, drawn-out process, right? Yeah. And the difference is, like, it was union negotiations that helped kill Yellow. I mean, there were so many impacts within Yellow that were showing up, whereas Convoy didn't have those same concerns. But, I mean, you look at it, and a company that was disruptive and definitely had people opinionated about it one way or another. You would think that the story, and I think some of it is news cycles have shortened significantly. And the difference with, like, we're at, a week, basically, since the announcement. And they found a buyer, and now, we have the article on the website, but so about a week. You have to remember with Yellow, like that's still kind of this ongoing process of getting rid of assets and things like that.
That'll
There's
take
just
a while.
a whole different unwinding process, and I think that's probably why.
Versus Convoy, it was like abrupt. It was
very
like,
quick.
Hey, we're closing down in 2 days. Nobody gets severance. We're keeping on a small team just to transition the tech. Otherwise, have a nice day.
Yeah.
It was super fast.
I'm interested to see how that turns out. One, because they're based in Washington. Washington's very pro-employee state, has very strong employment laws favoring the employee, and how that all works out, I'm not going to go even try to touch that.
I don't know. It's outside of my wheelhouse.
I know, because it's one of those states where you have to give a warn notice, basically 60 days, saying that you're planning to shut a facility. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that plays out.
I don't know either.
It just feels, it was fast. It was obviously fast. And ultimately the key is they ran out of money.
Yeah.
But how that all plays out. And
we'll have to see what happens as far as, when they pick up the pieces.
That's outside my pay grade.
We'll see what happens when they pick up the pieces. I did see Dan Lewis, their CEO, he posted on LinkedIn that, they've got to flush out a few things, but he is going to be posting more about, kind of the inner workings of what happened in the coming weeks and days. So I think that'll be interesting to see and learn from. Listen, it's unfortunate for the industry. I think there are some net positive. I saw a couple folks talking about this. They did bring a lot of technology to the industry. Yeah. They brought a lot of awareness. They brought a lot of talent to the industry. There's a lot of people that have, from Silicon Valley, say what you want about Silicon Valley. Yeah. They brought a lot of technology and resources to developing technology for the industry. So hats off to them for that.
Yeah, they were able to bring people from a tech background into a freight business, right? Yeah. Which is it's one of these things, like it helps on the tech side, and you look at, I think their driver app was one of the most widely adopted apps in terms of, like, from a driver perspective. The kicker is they're still at the core we're a freight brokerage, and they're bringing in people without freight knowledge into a freight brokerage and basically trying to scale. And I want to bring this up, and I think Craig Fuller wrote a great article kind of talking about how it was like death by overfunding. Yeah. You have to remember, they were $800 million at the peak, top line revenue. Value when they raised at $3.3 billion.
Yeah. That was on a $260 million funding round in 2 Aprils ago, so April 22.
Yeah, so you think about it, they're probably getting valued based off top line growth. in comparison, in a company that is a freight brokerage, largest freight brokerage in the country, C.H. Robinson, right? At their peak, they did what, $16 billion in revenue in a year? And now looking at market cap, similar metric in terms of like value, right? It was right at $10 billion. So you're telling me Convoy at its peak is effectively a third of what C.H. Robinson is now, but top line revenue wise, valuation's about a third of the size, but top line revenue is drastically different. It was the result of, does a VC know what they're investing in, right? They were effectively they were valuing a freight brokerage like it was a tech company, which is how Convoy portrayed itself. But ultimately, at the core of the business, it was still in a cyclical business model that you're still subject to a market that you have no real control over, right? So,
combination of overfunding, a combination of the freight recession hitting. I mean, a number of factors. It'll be interesting to learn kind of more from the inside as those details get released.
Absolutely.
But yeah, definitely an interesting story. Now, I think it's true. We also need to talk about, switching gears here a little bit. We need to hit a couple of topics today. We're going to give a brief overview of truckload demand. We've skipped that the last couple of weeks just to give some folks an idea on where we are. We are tracking fairly seasonally, but looking healthy going into the quarter, healthy, relatively speaking. We're going to look at truckload rates, where fuel and everything is really impacting spot rates, and then we're also going to talk about wait times, particularly automotive wait times. We're going to talk about the strikes there in a little bit, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the LMI, the Logistics Managers Index. Logistics markets, technically speaking, right now, the logistics industry is expanding right now, and it's expanding quite a bit. However, there's a little bit of misleading information in there depending on where you sit in the logistics world, because logistics is a lot of things. It's transportation, it's capacity, it's warehousing, it's so many things. So we're going to dive into that and uncover why the Logistics Manager Index is increasing, and if you're in transportation, why that may not help you a whole lot. So stay tuned. But first, let's throw up demand. Good old chart. It's a good one. One of my favorites. There it is. Beautiful. So you've got year to date, so about 80% of the way over is that dark blue shaded line, and then you've got subsequent different years here with the purple line of 2019. Honestly, I think at this point, the purple line is probably the most relevant to compare to, just because, pre-COVID, and, we're trying to understand where we are without all that stimulus money. But considering the blue line is as high as it is, Tony, and you might have a different opinion, but in my opinion, that looks great. We're in a high interest rate environment. I understand it takes time for all that stuff to really flush out, but volumes are 10% higher than they were this time in 2019. That's some real legitimate growth.
Yeah, and the economy's grown in that time, so you should see growth. I'll put the caveat that we were tracking to cross over 2022 levels and inflect positive year over year, and instead we have moved the exact opposite direction. The green line.
Oh, you're saying to pass 2022?
We were at the beginning.
Oh, we got close there end of October, didn't we? Beginning of October, excuse me.
And now we are moving in not really an opposite direction. We're kind of flatlining. Volumes this time last year were picking up steam. So I would have...
And we've been flat for the last probably 2.5 weeks.
Yeah. And...
Look at November, though. Look, the green line there, 2022 November, boom. If we just maintain flat, we'll cross it.
Yes.
I guess that's the question.
Where do we? I think it wouldn't be a surprise to turn positive year over year, just given the comps do get easier there. But overall, when you are tracking to cross over that line, and then you see the season, it's a seasonal dip at the beginning of October. It's normal. Look at 2021 and 2020 in the blue and orange lines at the top. You cross over into October, you see a decline before you see a subsequent increase, and depending on the timing of the year and where we're at.
So your concern right now is 2022. Actually, pretty much all these charts start to inch up in the back half
in the middle of October, and
we're not falling, but we're flat. So if we start to fall in November, early November, like a lot of these, when we're falling from a lower point.
Yeah, the key is the only year in the past 4 years, going back to 2019, the only year we've increased in the first half of November was 2020. 2021 we were lower, 2022 we were lower, 2019 we were lower.
Yeah.
So a lot of gets made about peak season. Like, what is
only
peak
2020 really rose?
Yeah, exactly. Now, the difference was, what do rejection rates do? Because I think that's a telling sign, because obviously this tracks contract demand, right? Freight demand. When things get more time sensitive, you may skip the contract freight market. You may just go straight to the spot market.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, you'll see rejection rates increase. Right now, I mean, we're talking, 3.5% or so rejection rate. I mean, it just doesn't feel like, even though this number's better than 2019, it feels like the situation's almost worse.
Yeah, so much capacity still.
Because there's just too much, right?
I saw from a carrier, and he was telling me that I posted something on Twitter about how there was too much capacity, and he said that he's heard from a lot of carriers that they're like staying afloat with like these SBA loans and all kinds of things. So they're, even if they are, even if they aren't running profitably right now, that they're still finding ways to get cash to just keep the business afloat. I don't know how, again, very anecdotal.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, you would think, one, you're taking out an interest rate on something that,
what's an SBA loan right now? It's probably got to be close to 11% interest.
It got to be, right? You're thinking new auto loans are crossing 10.
Yeah.
And mortgages are over 8. So, somewhere in that range, between 10 and 15, which is a fairly wide range for an interest rate. But
yeah,
I would say somewhere in there. The question is, can you make, as a trucking company in the future, not now, in the future when the market recovers, can you get your OR to where it's 90 or 85?
That's really
to cover the interest, right? Like, that's
not 95. 95 is not going to cut it.
No, exactly. You'll be losing money every month because
you got to eat.
So it's one of those, like, you have to be confident enough in the business that right now is the worst it's going to be, hopefully. Nobody knows that, right? Like, what's setting it up from declining further? I've written
Don't
about
bet against the American consumer.
Correct. There's that.
Keep buying.
But you did student loan repayments started this month, right? They started October 1st.
Sure. We did have people do early payments.
Yes,
but I understand what you're saying. They were about a third.
What happens, and I think the full effects of like what those do to spending will be masked, right? Because you have the holiday retail season. People will still spend money then. But what's it look like in January and February? Your spending already slows down off of that.
Yeah.
And we see it with freight demand. Just look, every year you come off October, November, December, January, February lower. Like, that's normal. But the question's going to be, do we find new lows in those months like, we've been obviously climbing out from those times, like, but we're not that much higher than we were in February. We're right at 11,000. I guess maybe 10% or so.
Right around there from the
between 8 to 10% from the low. But I see we have months, December last year, prime example. Drop that in a month. So, the question is, like, what actually happens when those full impacts are felt?
Yeah.
Because, again, I don't think they're going to be felt immediately just because people will continue to spend.
No, yeah, they definitely won't be felt immediately, but it'll be interesting to see where they do come. We have had partial student loan repayments for a couple of months. Hasn't seemed to have much of an impact, but to your point, right, that's just partial. Now, one thing that I do think, so demand is going to do what demand does, right? This is really an indication of where the economy is, particularly the physical goods side of the economy. I think the real indicator right now, especially as we look at where demand and capacity start to rebalance, is we've been, NTI, truckload spot rates have been flat. I'm going to put that in quotes, flat for the last 3 months.
Yeah.
Let's put it up on the chart here. It's flat, but it's not really flat. And the reason why I think this, let's go, there it is right here. So this is the last 3 months, so 90 days. Blue line is the percent change over the last 3 months, down 0.4%. Let's call it flat, right? The green line is the NTR spot rates with fuel cost removed, down 6.1%. So reality is that with fuel costs rising, carriers are getting paid the same amount, but they're taking home 6% less because of that rising fuel cost. And I think that's going to drive capacity, unfortunately, out of the market.
Yeah, effectively the underlying rate is falling and the carriers don't actually see that.
Yeah.
So when you see fuel, if you see fuel decline, right? Because right now you're in a time frame where fuel shouldn't really decline. Because if you think about diesel, competes with home heating oil, right? They're very, very similar. And we're about to enter winter months. So, I mean, you see demand ramp up for home heating oil. It causes the price of diesel to increase because you're taking some of that supply away. So, I mean, ultimately, the key there would be carriers might see what they're not feeling. Like, they may be getting paid the same. Their top line may be the exact same right now.
Right.
But if fuel comes down, then you have this ability, hey, oh yeah, it's going to cost me $100 less this week than it did last week. Fuel's come down. Yeah, the rate has declined right out from underneath you, and you would have never known it. Like, this is a period with fuel rising. You would think, well, one, you would have thought you would have seen an increase. What's interesting in this chart is the fact that by using $1.20 as that baseline for fuel, it never grew like in the last 3 months. Like, it never crossed over zero. We saw Labor Day's impact, right?
Yeah.
But you see an upward swing. But I mean, overall, it is a negative.
It got to flat.
Yeah.
It came back to flat is really what that did. So, yeah, I mean, this probably just shows the importance of, like, if you're a carrier, like, at all costs, try to get off of the spot market, move that contract rate, try to get a good fuel schedule with some fuel surcharges and to try to protect yourself from that.
Because your actual rate is declining.
Your actual rate's declining, right? You know, and that's the reality is that a lot of these contract rates that have this fuel surcharges are really a hedge for the fuel volatility in a way. Some of the guys make money. The big carriers will make money off it. They're buying rack or rack minus or whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, it's a really dangerous place to be for a lot of these small carriers. And I think it's going to cause some of them to shut their doors.
Well, it acts almost like it's a catalyst to accelerate exits. And then you add in the fact that demand's declining. Mm-hmm. I think it's just this kind of, I mean, we've been in it for a while, perfect storm. It's just a matter of how fast does it happen?
Right.
I think that's been the question, and I think that's the question we can't answer, right? I mean, we can make a best guess of when it kind of starts to come into equilibrium or the like, but it's so hard to tell because, like you said, nobody knows the financial situations of these actual firms.
Right.
And there's so many of them.
Yeah, you can make an estimate based on the current trend lines of carriers exiting the market and how many trucks that is, right? But here's the thing: is like, it doesn't stay constant. Unlikely. Yeah. It's very unlikely. If it does stay constant, we can make a great projection. It's probably going to be early 2025, but it's unlikely it will stay constant, and that's the challenge that we have to deal with, right? If rates go up, it could slow it down. If rates drop further, it could speed it up. I mean, there's any number of factors here. But anyways, we got to move on to the next phase. We got to talk about wait times here, particularly in the automotive sector, right? So this is something that we've been talking about a lot here. This is the index. You said keep an eye on it. We're keeping an eye on it.
It went up.
It went up. It went up a lot. There it is right there. Look, so the average wait time at automotive manufacturers as of this week is 168 minutes. So we're flirting with 3 hours here. Obviously, we know, right? There's strikes going on. But, like, I guess, Tony, tell us, why does the wait times go up at these facilities that strike? Like, wouldn't it not affect it because they aren't taking freight?
I mean, it's both loading and unloading at facilities. So, I mean, if you don't have a worker unloading a truck, I mean, the other factor, and I think this is some of the interesting stuff around Detroit and the like, is like drivers aren't going to cross a picket line.
Yeah,
like, it's just not going to happen. So, there's so many factors at play.
But I mean, the fact that you said that, there's probably like a driver out there that's like, hold my beer, I got this.
But I mean, look at how obviously there's some spikes, but I mean, it's relatively stable, right around 120 minutes since 2020. And now we've spiked to the highest level. I don't think it's like a coincidence. I mean,
no, we knew something was going to happen.
Yeah, it was just a matter of which index did you see it. And you have to remember, I mean, not every facility is this way.
More facilities have at it.
Yeah, and I think that's why you've seen it really start to pick up steam.
Because it was around 140 minutes like 2 weeks ago or something. So more facilities got added to it. Wait times are going up. It'll be interesting to see if it goes much higher. But I guess to your point, right, and here's the question is, how many drivers does this really impact, right? I mean, because the bigger impact here is the fact that a lot of these facilities now aren't shipping goods out.
Yeah.
That's probably the bigger impact.
What it really affects is, well, one, the larger carriers that were operating under contracts, like their equipment's getting tied up, and it can have knock-on effects from that. But the key,
if they're dedicated with like an auto manufacturer, do they still get paid when this stuff happens?
I have no idea.
I wonder that.
I mean, I would.
If anybody knows the answer to that, just let us know, like in the comments somewhere. Like if you have a not just normal contract, but if like you're actually dedicated carrier to an auto manufacturer and there's a strike going on like this, do you still get paid, or is there some type of compensation?
Yeah,
I'd really like to know.
Yeah, I'm interested to know that too, because I mean, it's one of the. It is. I mean, you have to think. I mean, volumes in these places are down because if facilities are effectively closed, like they're not moving freight in or out. What it does set up for whenever this does happen is expedited freight, because they're going to need to get these factories back online. And if they don't have inventory in stock, and like, I mean, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, like this just in time that is automotive's known for, like,
yeah,
they're going to have to really ramp that up very quickly. So
yeah,
if you're exposed to it, it might be hurting right now, but it may present an opportunity later. I don't really know, but it feels like that would be the case, just given the fact that we talked about automotive, the manufacturer inventories of finished vehicles being okay for a little while, but now we're starting to get into that hurting range. Yeah. And if they're not producing anything, they're going to have to speed up that process, which means they're going to need more of these deliveries faster.
That's right.
So because they haven't been getting them. So it's just like this knock-on effect that it may actually present an opportunity, but it's going to likely present the opportunity to those that were already working with them, that understand how the delivery cycles and all of that plays an impact.
Definitely.
But it may be an opportunity that wasn't there previously. It sucks in the moment.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep an eye on it, and let us know what you guys, anybody out there who's got experience with this, do let us know in the comments. All right. Last segment for today, we got to talk about the LMI. The LMI is the Logistics Managers Index. Okay. This is a composite measure. If you're familiar with the PMI, it tracks very similarly to that. Okay. Except this is for the logistics market. So let's go ahead and pull up the LMI. There it is right there. We're not going to spend a lot of time right here because we're going to go to the next chart, but this right here tracks, this is the composite measure. You're going to see everything that goes into this shortly, but this is a survey. It's put together by a couple of universities, including Colorado State, that we work with to basically do these surveys. The way you read this index, anything above 50 means that the logistics markets are growing.
Yep.
Anything below 50 means contraction. Mm-hmm. So just because it's down from the top peak doesn't mean it's technically the real value's down. It means it's at 52. Well, it means it's growing slower pace. Now, we did have a little bit of contraction in April and June and all that.
That's what we needed.
We did need some of that. Okay. Now, you're probably thinking like, okay, Luke, it's growing a little bit. Yeah, it's not growing in my neck of the woods. All right, let's break it down by segment, please. Go to the next chart. So this right here, love this. So you have now the Logistics Managers Index by those different segments. Oh, look at which one is at a 52-week low, or not a 52-week low.
It's a 52-week high.
It's actually a 52-week high. Is transportation prices at 43.
Still in 43, right?
Which means that they're going down, just not going down as quickly as they were a year ago. But they're going down. So that's going to drag it down. Inventory levels are down, and they're contracting more. Is actually, again, they're contracting.
Yeah, the key in
warehousing prices, though, at 72 means they're continuing to expand, and they're not expanding at their fastest rate, but not far off of it either.
Yeah, and I mean, look at inventory costs. The cost of inventory continuing to grow. Some of that has to go with that warehousing prices, but I mean, you look at this, the one that stands out. Transportation capacity continuing to grow. And right, it's not, I mean, it's a lot of things. It's not just
It's not just full truckload. Yeah, it's rail. It's train. Intermodal capacity has gone up. We were talking about this before the show. JB Hunt's added a ton of containers. Yeah. The shipping, a lot of the shipping container lots have added containers and ships.
Yeah, if you look,
it's a lot of capacity.
I mean, again, I think you said it earlier. O-rail domestics or outbound total rail volumes are at the highest they've ever been. Loaded volumes are not. I mean, they're close,
very close,
but they're not there. But empty volumes have soared, which just is the two combined showing the highest, just shows that we've added capacity in that sector. Why part of the reason you're seeing this.
Yeah, very true. Well, that's all we have time for. Tony, thank you for today. Folks, stay tuned. We got a lot more FreightWaves content coming up for you, and have a fantastic rest of your Wednesday.